Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Tim Portz. I'm the Vice President of Content here at BBI International, and I'm the Executive Editor of Biomass Magazine, Pellet Mill Magazine. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about pellet production with a particular emphasis on co-product production and its impact on plant profitability. I'll be sharing information that we gained from a producer survey that we launched in September. Nearly 50 members of the pellet production infrastructure in the United States and Canada responded to our survey, so we feel like we've got high confidence that the things that we learned from the survey really are indicative of what's happening out there in the field. I'm joined today by Greg Tucholski from Roof Briquetting Systems. Greg is going to talk about his equipment and how pellet producers can expand their product offering by deploying a briquetting and puck machine at their production facility. The webinar is brought to you today by Roof Briquetting Systems, and we certainly do appreciate their sponsorship of the webinar. Roof Briquetting Systems can help you offer customers a range of choices by supplementing your pellet business with briquettes. Versatile wood and biomass briquettes are quickly becoming a go-to biofuel for consumers all over the United States. They are clean, affordable, and can be used in any wood device from fireplaces and stoves to fire pits. Briquettes will open doors to new markets and growth opportunities for your business, and because they can be made from materials you already process, and then some, it's simple to get started. Plus, with substantial savings on energy, maintenance, and labor, briquettes are cheaper to make per ton than pellets. Our custom-engineered systems affordably and effectively compress wood chips, sawdust, bark, and those difficult-to-pellet materials into easy-to-manage briquettes that may look small but make a big impact on your bottom line. With Roof Briquetting Systems, you'll get a broader product line that really stacks up. What are you waiting for? Again, our thanks to Roof Briquetting Systems. The agenda for today and our webinar today is I'm going to walk you through the results of our survey. Again, that survey we launched in September. Nearly 50 pellet producers took the survey. I think you'll find the results of our survey certainly informative and interesting as well. When I am done walking you through those survey results, I'll be joined by Greg Tucholski. Greg will offer a presentation, and then we'll be able to take some questions at the end from the audience. On the right-hand side on your taskbar, you can submit a question, and I'll be happy to answer those questions at the end of our presentations, whether they're for myself or Greg. Just indicate on your question who the question is for. With that, I'd like to walk you through the results of our co-product survey from September. So this image here is from a pellet facility in Hayward, Wisconsin. And really the concept of this survey and our interest as an editorial team in co-product production was inspired by a visit to the Great Lakes Renewable Energy Pellet Production Facility in Hayward, Wisconsin I made about 2 years ago. While at that production facility, I met Herb Seeger, who may be the industry's most outspoken proponent of co-product manufacturing at a wood pellet production facility. So maybe I should establish up front what we mean by co-product co-product production. For us, the primary product of a wood pellet production facility are wood pellets to be used in a pellet burning appliance to heat a space for humans, whether that's a home, a small business, a hospital. That's the primary product of most wood pellet production facilities in this country. With the advent of the European market and the use of wood pellets to make electric power, of course, that's changing. But for the purposes of this survey, we considered that the primary product. The co-products then become really wood pellets or anything else that may be manufactured at a wood pellet production facility, to include briquettes, logs, pucks, shavings, or pellets used for purposes other than heating a space. So pet litter or industrial absorbents or wood shavings for the equine market. So really anything that fell into that category we call co-products. So let's start and have a look at what we learned. So the first question that we asked all of our producers is, are you manufacturing co-products? Again, with our eye on, we help them understand that we consider the primary product to be, again, wood pellets manufactured for either electric power production or heating spaces that human beings live in. And what we found that nearly 2/3 of the producers that responded to our survey said that yes, they are making at least one of these alternate products, whether they're barbecue pellets, absorbents, animal bedding, animal litter, or pucks, briquettes, and logs. A follow-up question to this question was for those respondents that said that they are not manufacturing and selling those co-products. And we wanted to better understand, well, why are they not manufacturing co-products? We sensed and had a feeling that we would learn that the majority of pellet producers did manufacture co-products. But we wanted to better understand, for those that aren't, what was the reasons for not. And the number one reason, according to our survey, 37% told us that they didn't have any spare production capacity to dedicate to the production of non-thermal pellet products. 25% suggested that they're not confident that in the size of the market opportunity, that they didn't feel like there was enough market to sell into for them to justify an entry into those product categories. Another 25% felt that, yes, there is a market there, but it's already saturated, or it's being well served by their competitors. And then 12.5% talk about a lack of access to the feedstock required to manufacture the certain type of product. And I don't talk a lot about it in the slide deck today, but one of the things that I really learned that was really important for Herb and his team at Great Lakes Renewable Energy relative to the barbecue pellets, and we'll hear more about barbecue pellet production further on in today's presentation, was the importance of feedstock. If you can remember back to the title slide from this webinar, that was a photograph of a line of barbecue pellet products that were differentiated by the species of wood. So I suspect that this 12.5% here are those producers that thought about entering the market in the barbecue line, but didn't feel like they could get their hands on the necessary cherry or hickory or mesquite or oak or any types of those species that would allow them to then jump into that marketplace and offer that product, offer an applewood wood pellet. So we thought that was interesting. The next thing that we asked, or that we looked at in the survey was, are there any interesting realities when you look at the survey respondents based on what part of the country they came from? And I think you'll see here that in the north central and northwest part of the country, north central is where Great Lakes Renewable Energy is, that sort of Wisconsin, Michigan pellet production region. Those two regions of the country pretty much shook out in the same way that the broader wood pellet industry did. About 2/3 are manufacturing co-products, and 1/3 have chosen not to play in that market. Interestingly, every producer that responded to our survey from the Northeast is engaged in the manufacture of co-products. Every last one of them. And we had more than 10 from the Northeast, so we feel that's a pretty good indication that in that part of the world, co-product production has really become the norm and is widely practiced. Also interestingly, in the Southeast, it's less common than the rest of the pellet industry when you look at it as a whole. About just over a third actually do engage in the production of co-products, and 2/3 do not. Everyone that follows this industry knows that for the most part, the mills in the Southeast are relatively new, they're relatively large, and they really are all gearing up and producing for an export market. That said, this next slide here sort of turns that assumption a little bit on its head. So another way that we looked at this survey was to ask producers to identify, well, what's your overall production capacity? And again, I don't know that those two numbers on the bottom there, so for facilities that are between 50,000 and 100,000 tons, or even less than 50,000 tons, I'm not surprised that, again, 80% of those facilities manufacture co-products. Again, these are facilities that look a lot like Great Lakes Renewable Energy. They are utilizing waste streams from sawmills. They've lived through a couple of tough down years, and they've expanded their offering to fill that production timeline throughout the year. So those numbers didn't surprise me. I was, however, surprised to see that facilities that had over 100,000 tons of capacity, nearly half of them were engaged in the manufacture of co-products. I expected to see that number closer to maybe 25% or even 20%. I did not anticipate that really any of the mills that are scaled and sized for over 100,000 tons of production capacity would play in this category, but according to our survey, about half of them are. All right, so now let's look at what folks are making. So we asked specifically about 7 different co-products, and this list was drawn up from our editorial board and folks that we've already interviewed and talked to about co-product manufacture. And so you can see the list here. So about half of the respondents that are manufacturing co-products of some kind, it's important to make that distinction. This question was asked of the people that answered yes to the question of, are you manufacturing co-products? Half of them are making barbecue pellets. This was surprising to me only in that it wasn't the largest, that it didn't enjoy the largest number of producers manufacturing co-products. I would have expected that. As you can see, animal bedding is the clear winner there. 62% of pellet manufacturers that are engaged in co-product manufacturing are making animal bedding of a pellet nature. You can see that some are set up to produce shavings as well. About a third of producers who are involved in co-product production are also making animal bedding from shavings. Just over half are engaged in the absorbent market. I thought that was interesting, right there on par with barbecue pellets. 15% are making briquettes, logs, or pucks. Just 15%. Greg's going to talk about briquettes, logs, and pucks later on in our webinar and talk about the market opportunity that's out there for producers should they take on this category. I think it is interesting, and I've talked to a number of producers who have added briquettes to the production environment, and the reality is far less than 20% of the wood-burning appliances out there in the country can burn wood pellets. So for producers who want to be able to access everybody who has a wood appliance, briquettes certainly unlocks that market opportunity. It's interesting. That number is interesting to me. I'd be interested to see what Greg has to say about it. We asked about briquettes, logs, and pucks with accelerants or repellents, so these specialty products where maybe it's a fire starter, or maybe it's a log or a briquette with a mosquito repellent for use in campfires in the summer to keep those pests at bay. And then 15% of producers are involved in the production of garden mulch. So I thought that was some very interesting information. And again, animal bedding, the clear favorite right now. Let's talk a little bit about the revenue from these non-thermal pellet products. So we asked folks, well, what percentage of your annual revenue then is generated by the sale of these non-thermal pellet products? And so you can see that for, almost half of those respondents, it's a small part of their revenue. It's less than 5%. That said, the next largest is this 30%, more than 20% of the annual revenue for 30% of those producers who are engaged in co-product manufacturing is more than 20% of their top-line revenue, which I thought was fascinating. Again, I did not expect that. That's a larger number than I thought. About 15% enjoy between 5 and 10% of their top-line revenue from co-products, and then 11%, or somewhere between 10 and 20%. So together, when you look at producers who are manufacturing co-products that enjoy somewhere between 30 and 40%, or sorry, more than 10% of their top-line revenue is 40% of those that are producing. So it's a significant revenue engine for nearly half of the producers who are engaged in co-product manufacture. But we all know that it's not just about the revenue. It's not about top-line revenue. Revenue's, yes, important, but what about profitability? And so we wanted to try and get a handle on, okay, so maybe you're filling your production schedule with these non-thermal pellet products, but what's the impact on your overall profit margin? So we asked that question. How would you describe the profitability of those products when you compare them to, again, that baseline main product of wood pellets manufactured for home or business heating? And the third suggested that the level of profitability was about the same. More than a third, close to 40%, said it was slightly more profitable. And 11% suggested that the manufacture of those products was significantly more profitable. And you don't have to spend too much time at a hardware store or a farm store and look at the price for a 40-pound bag of wood pellets that you'd put into a pellet appliance, and then the price for a 5-pound bag of apple pellets used to put in your pellet barbecue to understand why that is. Producers are getting a far greater price for these specialty pellets than they get for their wood pellets for home heating. Of course, the cost of feedstock is a lot higher as well. Nevertheless, when you look at producers that enjoy slightly more or significantly more profit, it's nearly half of the producers that are engaged in co-product manufacturing. There are some producers that have not figured out how to increase profits. 10% suggest that, well, actually, co-product manufacturing, it's slightly less profitable. And 4%, I think that was just a couple of respondents, actually, I think that's how the math shook out, said, you know what, maybe it's just us, but there's significantly less profit in this endeavor for us at all. And a handful that said they're just not profitable. We're not turning a profit of any kind on these products. All right. How about production time? And I thought that revenue and time might sort of net out and be the same. And I think probably the survey disclosed that more than half of producers are spending less than 5% of their overall production time on the manufacture of these non-thermal co-products. But a fifth are spending more than 20% of their production time on these. So it seems a little bit like we've got a group of producers out there that have figured out how to enjoy some greater profitability on the manufacture of these products. They're growing their market share inside of those marketplaces, and as a result, I think they're driving more production time to those. Certainly, if it was my pellet operation and I had figured out a way to move all that inventory and win those orders from my retailers, I'd probably start and shift as much time over to those products as I could. So I think that's an interesting slide and takeaway as well. We wanted to understand also about, well, who's buying these? How are these products getting to market? And I'm not sure that this is all that surprising. The one number that does surprise me a little bit is that for 30% of our respondents, it's an entirely different set of retailers than their retailers that they trust to take their thermal pellet products to the marketplace. And that was surprising to me. I thought maybe we'd have 80% that would say, you know, it's pretty much the same retailers. And only 1 in 10 use the exact same channels to sell both. And 30% use an entirely different. 60% use kind of a blend, right? Well, we sell some barbecue pellets to our distributors and retailers that buy the thermal pellets, but we've also got some customers that just buy these specialty products from us. I thought that was interesting. Again, 30%, totally new book of business for them, new relationships they need to maintain, new opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. Kind of paired right alongside of that is, all right, well, if you're in fact using new channels to take these products to market, how then is your organization, your pellet facility, getting those products to those distributors and retailers? 15% say, well, we use the exact same channel, same salesperson, same broker, whatever the case may be. But nearly 1 in 5 say we've built an entirely different sales channel. It's totally new, totally different. And then 66% use a blend, existing and some new. So I think that's interesting. You know, we're talking about 86% of producers that are engaged in manufacturing and marketing this have had to build some new inroads. So very, very few producers are leaving their sales engine, you know, unchanged to participate in this marketplace. For the most part, if you're going to manufacture co-products, you're going to have to think about different ways to access those market opportunities. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Now let's talk a little bit, as we kind of conclude here, my comments, my portion, and what we've learned is we wanted to understand attitudes about the role that these non-thermal pellet products play for producers. And so nearly half suggested that the manufacture and sale and profitability and all the things that go along with it is an important part of their business, and it's growing. All right? And another 37% said, well, they're definitely important, but for now, our year-over-year sales is relatively flat. I think that's an important distinction. I'll be interested to see if we offered the survey again next year, if that number changes, or if the market can continue to expand. Again, it's not unlike the sale of pellet appliances for home or business heating, in that every time a barbecue pellet or barbecue pellet grill is sold, the market for barbecue pellets grows slightly. So the more and more of those appliances that get sold, the more and more opportunity there is, and potentially that 37% number of producers that suggest, hey, this is important, but so far we're sort of flat. So again, half of the producers who are involved in co-products recognize this is an important part of our business, and we are effectively growing that business. And almost everyone else says it's important, but we haven't figured out how to grow the market. So I want to conclude and offer this thought. Number one, I can't thank the producers who are on the call right now who took our survey enough. This is the third survey that we've done of pellet producers, and I have to say the information and the learning that our editorial team did, that I did, and hopefully that all of our readers did, there really is not any other kind of article that can match it. But all of that is predicated on actually having people take the survey. So for those of you that took the time, thank you for taking the survey. And the last thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to direct people to the November issue of Biomass magazine if you haven't read the story. The story is about the survey, yes, but also about Great Lakes Renewable Energy and Herb Seeger and what he had to say about it. And I'll just conclude with this quote from the article. And this is what Herb told me about his facility and co-products and how important it is to their operation. He said this. He said, "We were looking to change our business model," Herb says. "The original business model presented to the bank 8 years ago looks nothing like what we are doing today. And had we stuck with the business model presented to the bank 8 years ago, we simply wouldn't be here today." So Herb is unequivocally believes that his facility has been able to stay open, keep people employed, and keep their production environment up and running year-round because of this co-product strategy that they've really pursued and embraced. So my thanks to Herb on that. Well, that certainly concludes my portion of today's presentation. I want to remind people, again, from the survey, just 15% of our producers suggested that they have briquetting and puck production assets at their production facility. And our next presenter this afternoon is looking to talk specifically about what that can do for your production environment. So I'm joined now by Greg Tucholski from Roof Briquetting Systems, today's sponsor. Greg's going to talk about their equipment, what it does for producers, how it fits into their current production environment, and the markets that it can unlock for producers. So Greg, looking forward to your presentation, sir. Take it away.
Thank you, Tim, and for this opportunity to talk today to the pellet manufacturers who have joined us. My talk today is the possible benefits of briquetting for pellet manufacturers. The basic benefits include that wood briquettes and wood pellets are similar products. We offer the opportunity to expand your market and sales. We can find a way of having a higher utilization of your feedstock, and there's a larger profit per ton to be made for a wood briquette. And mostly because of that is briquettes typically sell for as much as pellets or more, and the production cost is less. So these main points, I'm going to break down each of these for us. So briquettes and pellets are biofuels. They are compacted from biomass, typically wood, for generating heat. So really, briquettes are just like pellets, other than that they don't go in a pellet stove. They go into all the other wood-burning appliances. So pellets have been around for quite a while here in the States, much longer in Europe. So wood briquettes being rather newer, maybe in the last 10 years, where there's been the experience of wood pellets for well over 30 years. So it's a newer market, but it keeps growing every year. So one of the similarities is the marketplace, and I think this is one of the keys where wood briquettes is a big advantage for pellet makers. Places that sell your pellets are places that would sell wood briquettes. They're also not competing, they're non-competing products. And the fact that pellets support pellet stoves while wood briquettes go into all the other appliances. So you would not be taking away from your own market, you'd just be supplementing that. So sales staff would be calling on the same people, and earlier in Tim's presentation, he showed where the sales channels and all that would be the same. So therefore, there's a big reduction on the labor, the startup sales. All these factors make this transition much easier. So when you go in the wood briquette market, you already have places that will offer and are readily able to sell the same products without generating new markets or new avenues. The feedstock. Pellet makers have to do a lot of conditioning of the material. Obviously, depends on where they're getting that material, whether it's sawmills, waste products from flooring, furniture, cabinetry, or other wood industries. Hydraulic press briquetters can use all the same feedstock that the pellet mill can, plus more. It's a more flexible fuel. So because of that, again, you're not going out and looking for a different product, different feedstock. The feedstock that you have is there, and there's going to be benefits that I'll talk later about. Maybe some of the material that you can't currently use to make a good pellet will make a good briquette. Briquetters in general are fairly small footprint. They can easily slide into any working pellet mill's production facility. Simply enough as just tapping off an auger from a feed line and running it over to the briquetter is all you would need to do to start supporting that with some small amount of packaging equipment. So even in the picture you see here, we're showing that we produce briquetters and put them in shipping containers just to show you the small area that could be used. Space is always a premium, and anyone in manufacturing knows that, where briquetting presses don't need some of the other equipment. We don't have cooling lines. We don't have other parts of some of the other equipment that the co-products need, that right after the briquetter, you use some packaging. Other than that, it's relatively small. Other similarities. Briquettes, as we mentioned, are like the pellets, but for all the other appliances. The density of a briquette is over 60 pounds a cubic foot. It's typically dense as water, and that product, therefore, gives it its burning qualities, typically 8,000 BTUs per pound, right on line with pellets. Obviously, the species and the moisture content will affect it somewhat, but that's a general good rule of thumb, is 8,000 BTUs per pound. Where wood briquette consumers typically are going against the cordwood market. So one easy comparison for that consumer would be that 1 ton of briquettes equals 1 cord of seasoned firewood. And the footprint of that, or the size of that cord, or the pallet size, is 4 by 4 by 3, where a full cord is 4 by 8 by 4. So because it's denser, it's a smaller footprint, less space to have. It's also about 1.7 times more energy per pound for wood briquettes as it is for cordwood. Another aspect is you're able to expand your market that you're in. Okay, your pellet market, primarily, as Tim explained, is for the domestic market for heating a home, a school, or a business. Wood briquettes can go in all those similar. Right now, most of them are for the domestic or home users. Data has shown that there's many more wood-burning stoves out there. A report done by Hearth Patio and Barbecue Association has listed that over 7 million cordwood stoves were purchased over the last 15 years, while just under 1 million pellet stoves. There are other products out there, such as campfires and grills, that don't count in this, and also homes that are built with fireplaces are not coming into this data. So overall, briquettes are newer, there's less producers, and there's less production being made. So even though the potential market is greater, this market is in its early infant stages, and there's lots of room for growth. Each year we see more and more wood briquetters are getting into the market, and sales are continuing to grow each year. Last year, with the warm winter, was the first year in many that my customers did not sell out by December. But 4 or 5 years before that, all those producers had been sold out for whatever they made in the summertime months and up through that winter season by December. Hopefully the winter this year will be better and more realistic, and those sales will get back on course to what they have been in years past. So here's the chart showing, just expanding on upon the higher sales of cordwood appliances versus pellet stoves. Pellets are important, but there's also a big market out there that pellet makers, because they have the right equipment, can start capturing some of that also. Also, with wood briquettes, similar to pellets, households need to buy a pretty big volume, typically 3 to 5 tons of briquettes per heating season, depending on the region they are and the size of their house. I would imagine this is in line with what pellet consumption is for domestic users. This is another good aspect over some of the co-products, and the fact that maybe a barbecue pellet may yield a higher margin, but people aren't buying 5 tons of apple pellets where they would need it for a heating source. Again, the sales effort is minimal, because pretty much anywhere where they're selling pellets, those retailers would also offer and sell a wood briquette. Other places such as chimeneas, camping, outdoor boilers, cooking, some of the other things with campgrounds and state lines where they don't allow the transfer of wood over those lines because of some of the insect infestations, a wood briquette is a safe product there. So there's a lot of other avenues besides just where the home heating, the campgrounds and those areas would be a great home for a wood briquette product. Also, a way to expand your market is, because these retailers can take both products and sell both products, you can offer split trucks. So during the ramp up of a briquette production, you don't have to send a full truck of bricks. You could split possibly 20 tons of pellets with four tons of bricks until those individual retailers start developing and growing and expanding the market. Another part of that is maybe a retailer can't buy a whole truck of pellets, but now offering briquettes is another solution. Now you can reduce that freight cost and be able to get both products on one truck and lower that cost to the retailer. The utilization of your feedstock is another big advantage. Pellet mills need a high amount of conditioning. To go through a pellet mill and through the die, your product size needs to be sized significantly, 1/8 inch minus, 3/16 minus, somewhere in there. Hydraulic presses can take up to 2-inch chips. Now, this may not be the ideal product for the retail market. It could be for some other areas, industrial, campgrounds, barbecues. But for domestic, we suggest something in a 3/4 inch minus, which is still significantly larger, higher, and reduce and require less energy consumption in the shredding field. Another utilization where bark is bark. Bark will not work well, or as I'm told, in pellet mills, primarily due to the wear and the silica in the bark. Pellet mills would see a high rate of replacement and maintenance. Bark is an acceptable product. It actually often has higher BTU value, and that product right now already has to be disposed of or handled differently, or maybe you can attain it at lower feed rate or lower cost rates that you could for your other material. If you're bringing in whole tree, you might be using that bark as mulch or for firing your dryers. Here's a way that you can take that bark and put it into the value of your brick. Some people can even market the bark brick for a little bit more money because of the higher BTU value. In lines with that is the tree slash. A lot of the smaller portions of a tree that aren't logged or used for sawmills or are good for lumber, that has to go somewhere. Out on the forest decks, a lot of this is actually being burned up. This can be utilized with your briquetter also. That whole tree can be shredded up as long as it's meeting the two main criteria of moisture content and particle size. So this is another area or possible market to add or better utilize your feedstock. The moisture level. Pellet mills are pretty stringent on the moisture that they have to hold. Typically, it's in the 6 to 8%. If the moisture levels get too low, water needs to be added. If they're higher, the production mill, the pelleting mill won't run efficiently, could cause shutdowns or decreased production rates. With a hydraulic press briquetter, on the fly will not impact the briquette production rates. We can go down even as low as less than 3%, as you can see in the lower slide, briquettes made from torrefied material. So higher BTU values where you're getting closer to what coal is. Briquettes, pellets of the 8,000 BTU range. Torrefied briquettes can go up as high as 10 to 12,000 BTUs per pound. So with utilization stock, a lot of pellet mills are looking at hardwood pellets, pushing hardwood pellets. Briquetters can also use softwood. Most or over half of the wood briquettes produced now around the world is using softwood. There's a large softwood feedstock out there. Briquetters can use that, and actually that product, after going through a briquetter, turns into a hardwood. You're going to get the product to be same or similar burning characteristics. The density is going to be similar. So you're actually almost converting that softwood into a hardwood once it's been briquetted. So a higher profit per ton that I mentioned in the beginning, again, is on the basis that briquettes sell for as much or more than pellets, while they cost less to produce. They cost because there's less conditioning. You don't have to dry it as strictly, or material that you've already found, if it doesn't meet the range that fits perfectly with your pellet mill, could be then funneled towards your briquetter. The conditioning of the shredding, instead of going down to 1/8 inch, 3/16 to get through the dies, you only have to shred down to 3/4. So even on the other side of the dust that don't work well in a pellet mill can be combined with this 3/4 inch material to make great quality briquettes. So some of that dust that was kind of lost, that maybe not being utilized at all, or you had to try to find another home for, or use somewhere, and even the burners for dryers, the biomass dryers, wasn't a good place. Here's a home now to acquire that dust and make a good, valuable product with. Briquetters can run unattended. They're a hydraulic press. Therefore, they don't generate a lot of heat. They can run without operators on site. Most wood briquetting plants run without a second and third shift presence. Most of the labor occurred in a briquetting plant is for the packaging. And packaging can be done much faster, even on a manual level, than the production rate is. So therefore, you can maximize your time while running the briquetter and just palletize and package on a single shift. Maintenance, because we're using hydraulic force, we're not using heat, we're not using friction, components last longer. Pistons and molds, which are the main wear parts, last for 5,000, 10,000 hours, sometimes even more. Pellet dies, depending on the material, typically have a much shorter lifespan, typically take longer to put in, and they typically cost more. So just the overall wear, because you're generating a lot of heat with that friction process, is going to wear out a lot of components in that piston mill. I'm sorry, the pellet mill. The change out, I believe I've been told by some of my customers who do both dies and rollers, probably about a day's job. Piston and a mold and a briquetter is less than 4 hours at a lower part cost. Power consumption, because it's a hydraulic press, typically whatever size briquetter you run, whether it's on the smaller or larger end, it's going to consume about the same amount of energy at about 65 kilowatt hours per ton. That, along with the lower conditioning requirements, lowers the power consumption, and in addition with the maintenance requirements, all lead to higher profit per ton. This last slide was done by University in Austria, showing the power percentage of the yield of that product versus the power or the energy coming out of that, where pellets is 2.7. What they're using is, in metric terms, 4,900 kilowatt hours per ton of product, where briquettes is the same energy. It's just that it's less energy to make. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'll pass this back over to Tim.
Greg, thank you. If anyone does have questions, we're happy to take them. Let's certainly leave that up for just a second. Roof briquetting systems. Greg Tucholski, 440-779-2747. Greg, I think I'll start with a question for me, and that is, in terms of deploying the roof briquetting system at an existing production facility, what's a good rule of thumb in terms of how long does that process take once a producer decides to go ahead and get involved in a briquette product offering? How long does it take your equipment to become installed and become operational at a facility?
Well, the briquetter itself is 100% assembled, except on the larger models that the press may have to be bolted together just for shipping reasons. Briquetters are put in place and power put to it in less than a day. So depending on what the ancillary equipment is, running maybe the feed auger to it, the briquetter portion itself is very quick. I've had customers who had one briquetter. When the second briquetter showed up on site, they unloaded that morning and they were making production that afternoon.
That's pretty impressive. And Greg, what do you, when producers are reaching out to you, you know, we talked a lot about, and you talked a lot in your presentation about, it just opens up such a bigger market. Is that really their motivation for bringing in briquette production to their operation, or is it something else? Is it that they're seeing feedstock that they can't use that, boy, they'd sure like to be able to use and make the most of, or what do you typically find ultimately brings people to you as customers and prospects?
Well, the two main points is the feedstock. Sometimes the material that they can't use in the pellet mill, a lot of times that's the smaller fines that get shaken out that won't make a good pellet. And also in the fact that now there's a product out there that they can supplement with, and they're already going to those same retail agents. So Their sales avenue is very simplified and something that has even a higher margin.
Got it. Looks like that's all the questions. I want to conclude by thanking you, Greg, and for Roof Briquetting Systems making all of this content available to us today. I want to pass along a couple of other notes about upcoming events. Certainly, we are in full swing right now for the International Biomass Conference and Expo. Our agenda development process is well underway. We closed the abstract period for that event last week. We are hosting a pre-conference at the International Biomass Conference and Expo, Biomass Preparation, Handling, and Storage Workshop. We're going to be accepting abstracts for that event until December 12th. So if you are involved in and are expert in handling biomass, preparing it, making it ready for conversion into some sort of biomass to energy product, whether that be a wood pellet, a briquette, or a wood chip. And we are even obviously accepting abstracts for things beyond woody biomass. So if you know how to handle MSW and want to be considered as a potential speaker for that event, please take note of that December 12th deadline. Additionally, everybody who's on the call today qualifies for a $250 discount to the International Biomass Conference and Expo. I know we have a very producer-centric audience on the call today. Pellet producers, as you have always enjoyed free registration to the International Biomass Conference and Expo, this year is no different. If you work at a wood pellet manufacturing facility, we build this show for you, and you can attend as our guest for no cost to yourself. And finally, a couple more upcoming events. December 15th, Biodiesel Magazine is hosting a webinar called One Chemical, Two Biofuel Industries, Multiple Applications. And again, the International Biomass Conference is scheduled for this April 10th through the 12th here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The International Fuel Ethanol Workshop and Expo is same venue, Minneapolis, Minnesota, in June, and co-located with the International Fuel Ethanol Workshop and Expo is the National Advanced Biofuels Conference and Expo. My name's Tim Portz. I'm the executive editor of Biomass Magazine and Pellet Mill Magazine. My thanks, of course, to Greg Tucholski and to Roof Briquetting Systems for sponsoring today's webinar. Please keep reading Biomass Magazine and Pellet Mill Magazine. Please keep joining us for our webinars, and again, to all the producers who participated in the survey where we learned so much about how co-products are folded into your operations, I thank you, and I urge you to please participate in the next survey that comes across your desk from Pellet Mill or Biomass Magazine. Have a terrific afternoon and a terrific holiday season, and I hope to see everybody that's on the phone right now in April in Minneapolis at the International Biomass Conference and Expo. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks again to Roof Briquetting Systems. Thank you.